Welcome to your Full Metal Jaguar Masterclass Guide. I'll be your host JB, and in today's video I'll be explaining exactly how to get the most out of this class. This is the next part of my Masterclass series, aiming towards getting new players through the entire main story of Xenoblade X, with the goal of teaching you about how this game works. As always, no endgame builds will be discussed throughout the duration of this video, so please check back later once I've gotten around to making those video guides. Additionally, if you enjoy this content and find it useful, please consider hitting that subscribe button and notification bell, as it's free and it helps me out a ton. With all that out of the way, let's get right into the guide. The Full Metal Jaguar class consists of both the dual guns and dual swords weapon types, and falls down the middle class path, which I consider the best for teaching players the finer details of overdrive. The class boasts the incredibly effective decoy effect, and a variety of different arts and skills that allow you to take full advantage of this game's combat mechanics, and absolutely dominate any enemy you stumble upon. As such, this class provides you with increased melee and ranged accuracy, as well as evasion, setting you up nicely to fill a sort of pseudo-evasion tank role, albeit one that absolutely chews through enemy health bars. Overall, if I haven't made it clear enough already, the Full Metal Jaguar class is incredibly powerful and is a great way to learn all of the mechanics that X has to offer. Your primary weapon for this build will be the dual guns, arguably the best ranged weapon in the game with a ton of utility, DPS and defensive effects, making it one of the most popular weapon types from the original. In total, dual guns have 11 different arts, providing a variety of buffs, auras and attack arts, all of which are great for maintaining overdrive within their own way, including a brand new art for this game, which is given for completing Liesel's affinity missions. They also come in any of the 6 attributes, allowing for a variety of different damage types, although typically the ether-based variants are the ones which are most highly praised. Their auto attacks also aren't that bad, providing a decent cooldown speed and okay TP generation depending on their magazine capacity. It's worth pointing out also that despite being dual guns, the actual magazine capacity of them is shared, so keep that in mind. Overall, the dual guns weapon type is a staple of this game and is absolutely something that you should at the very least get yourself familiar with, especially considering that there's a good chance this will be one of the most popular weapons once again in the Definitive Edition. That brings us to the dual swords, which fall into a fairly awkward position within this class. They possess 13 arts which, for the most part, want to take center stage themselves, with a variety of strong offensive options and a decent selection of buffs and auras, but put simply, get overshadowed by dual guns being superior in practically every way, even going as far as having certain arts be made completely irrelevant if ran together, that being upper hand. They can come in a variety of attributes, but are largely limited to being physical, which also just so happens to be the attribute enemies typically have a high resistance to. But their saving grace, however, is their auto attack capabilities, having a great super quick cooldown, amazing TP generation capability, and actually living up to the dual aspect of their name this time around by hitting twice per auto attack. This isn't to say that dual swords are bad weapons, as I'm making them out to be here, more so that they don't synergize super well with the ranged weapon they're paired with, and in the right situation, with the right build, can be an outright terrifying weapon to use. As for the loadout, this build will be designed to maintain overdrive as effectively as possible, and provide even the newest of players the opportunity to take down some of the strongest monsters that reside within Mira. The absolute king and standout art that we need to talk about is Ghost Walker, a green buff art which simply grants the player decoy. Despite being nerfed in the Definitive Edition, allowing debuff effects to now pass through, decoy still proves its worth by guaranteeing evasion for a specific number of hits based on the decoy rank, which is raised with the art's level, making this an obvious priority to sink BP into. I mean, need I say more? A combination of overdrive reducing its cooldown and virtual immunity to damage if used correctly makes this an essential pick for any build that runs the dual guns weapon type. And if you want to sink some time into Elmer's affinity missions, Ghost Factory is even better, making the art a party-wide effect. To complement this, I also typically like to run Primer, Blood Sacrifice, and Early Bird for added stupidity. Primer is the art that obsoletes Upper Hand, providing the same effect of granting critical power, which is a fancy way of saying increased critical damage, and now raises TP by 200 on top of being an immediate reuse art, providing spam potential during overdrive. Blood Sacrifice is the typical cut your HP in half type art, this time gaining 1000 TP each time you do, and can be used to great effect to maintain overdrive even in the most dire of situations. Lastly, Early Bird is an excellent aura for this class, raising your critical chance, critical power, and evasion even further, to result in even more potential damage and some extra security in case decoy's effects run out prematurely. That leads us onto our main yellow arts for this build, which we'll be using to build up the counter and ramp up our damage output on the enemy. Sliding Slinger is an excellent option as it has 6 hits, increases TP via its secondary and tertiary cooldowns, as well as just by hitting from the side, and can act like a repositioning tool due to its animation. Violent Streak is also excellent, being AoE around the player, having a ton of hits, and raising TP once again with crits, which pairs excellently well with the Early Bird aura just discussed, leaving our final art as Executioner. This art is crazy powerful. It has a ton of hits, boost damage if used in a range combo, which just means if you used a dual guns art before this one, and scales with potential, meaning the damage of this can just ramp up to insane levels. The final art we then need to include is a purple art, providing us with a consistent way to regain TP during overdrive, and Side Slash still remains to be the champ when it comes to these arts. It has 2 hits, meaning the TP gain will proc twice, is an immediate reuse art, meaning it can be spammed multiple times back to back, resulting in it being one of our most important arts for this build. Other arts you may want to consider are Effect Charge, a brand new purple dual guns art, having 1 hit which provides a brand new debuff, forcing the art's bonus effect to activate regardless of if the conditions are met. 0-0, a crazy fast high hit count art which shreds enemies and makes up for Violent Streak's weakness of having a crazy long animation, and Sky High, an interesting art which can be used to perform something known as an air combo within this game, although you'll have to be patient for a future video on how that works. As for skills, Mindscape and Phantom Counter are a must, providing extra TP to the player and raising the counter automatically each time you activate Overdrive, which new players will find very helpful indeed when it comes to mastering the Overdrive mechanic, and effectively introduces you to how you'll be playing the endgame. As for your other skills, Steady Hand will be my recommendation for obvious reasons, as it's an accuracy boosting skill and is super useful when facing higher level enemies, and for your final skill, I'd recommend Combo Gunner, ramping up your potential damage output even more due to the sheer number of ranged arts you possess. You could alternatively run Hellhound, as this is what I originally recommended for the original game, but now in DE, every class effectively starts with this effect as default, meaning it's not as essential as before, but if you're just trying to learn and want to make the most out of it, then go for it. That brings us straight into the gear topic, and you get the drill by now. You should be equipping an eye patch as your headgear to gain an easy source of Appendage Crusher. This effect works by lowering what's called the hardness tier of an appendage, which is a filter all your damage goes through, and the lower the hardness tier is, the more damage you will deal to it, up to a total of 250% extra damage. The easiest source can be obtained from Satie's side quest, which unlocks during chapter 3, and is super quick and easy to get, but there's also another source. I've neglected to mention uniforms up until this point, as they take up all your remaining gear slots, which could affect your total TP capacity, which is typically essential or at least incredibly helpful. But now that that's been taken care of with Mindscape, I can mention it now. Uniforms provide a ton of great attribute resistances, overall lowering your damage taken from all sources, grant an additional appendage crusher for you to take advantage of, and typically come with a ton of useful traits, the easiest of which to obtain is by completing Elma's first affinity mission after chapter 3, known as We Were Soldiers. On top of giving you some lore to set up the endgame, this will provide you with all the tools you need to take on the enemy and show them what's what. That brings us to today's demonstration, which will be a tad different than normal. I'll once again be using Elma instead of the custom avatar to both save me some time grinding all of the arts for FMJ, and due to Elma practically running the same build. But more importantly, our target will be Barnabas the Despo instead of the usual point attack Sinicular. I recommend actually using this boss also to practice for yourselves, as it helps beat in the core principles of running this build. A single hit will instantly KO you, so you need to make sure decoy is up constantly and helps you hone your overall skills. That's why at the start of your overdrive you should always typically begin with Ghost Walker or Factory, and then segue straight into Sliding Slinger to build the counter further. From here, it's just a matter of building up the counter as much as possible before your decoy art comes off cooldown, and so to maximize this, I was going Primer into Violent Streak, yet again taking advantage of the double overdrive count bonus of going from a green into a yellow art. It's also worth talking about briefly how buffs and debuffs work in X. Ordinarily, the highest tier effect a buff or debuff can apply is level 5, excluding secondary and tertiary cooldown shenanigans, but there is a balancing mechanic in place that grants a 15% chance of a buff being leveled up to the maximum tier of 6 when the effect already exists on the target. What this means is that spamming decoy on yourself as much as possible will have the tendency to rank up your decoy effect to level 6, and once it has, you can no longer apply the level 5 effect. What this means is once you notice that your decoy has been ranked up to level 6, you want to begin specifically using your decoy art once it has reached at least its secondary cooldown, showcased by the green bar that circles the art whilst already charged, as this way you can maintain your decoy by applying the level 6 effect over and over again, and since there is no level 7, it can't accidentally rank up once more. Debuff effects like Topple and such also function the same way, preventing you from just being able to infinitely topple an enemy like how you would in Xenoblade 1, so this is always worth keeping an eye out for. Getting back to the overdrive, once you've gotten decoy up and built up the counter a tad, it's time to start using Side Slash to restore your TP, as each hit of a purple art will refund 10 TP multiplied by whatever the overdrive counter is currently at. You may have actually noticed by this point in the video that this build is practically identical to the Infinite Overdrive build I talked about a few years back. And for the most part, all of the same advice from there can also be applied here. This is also an example of where all the accuracy I've been telling you all to get actually becomes useful, as ordinarily, me facing off against an enemy 20 plus levels higher than myself would result in a ton of misses, preventing me from building up the overdrive counter and using this build to its full potential. Use Blood Sacrifice whenever you need to gain TP in a pinch, whilst also extending the overdrive timer due to it being a green art, and once you're ready, activate your aura and begin annihilating the enemy ahead of you with Executioner and your other yellow arts. This is admittedly where potential becomes really useful, as it can drastically scale up the amount of power your arts have in this situation, but even without a ton of it, instead just running the uniform and eye patch, you can still make your way through the enemy's health bar with ease and take on pretty much any enemy that Xenoblade X throws at you. And with that, we've pretty much summed up exactly how to build and play the full Metal Jaguar class, meaning that this is it for your masterclass guide. As always, I hope you found this guide useful and that it helps you take on Mira in its entirety. If it has, I'd once again appreciate it if you'd consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future guides within the Masterclass series and all of the other exciting Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition content that I plan on bringing you all very soon. I thank you all for watching though, and I'll catch you in the next one. Till then, guys.